We finally have an update on the Capcom Cup pay-per-view announcements and drama that has ensued over this saga. But if you've been out of the loop, I'm going to break down the story so far and the latest announcement from Capcom and the developers, and break down a bit of the community reaction and provide my own takes and analysis on the situation. So we're, of course, talking about Capcom Cup 12, the $1 million tournament, the culmination of a year-long Pro Tour, the Capcom Pro Tour. This event going pay-per-view. So this announcement about Capcom Cup and its pay-per-view first broke back in late September, October of 2025. And the announcement was basically saying, hey, guess what, everybody? Great news. We're now going to be charging pay-per-view for Capcom Cup, which was historically always a free streamed event live on Twitch and YouTube, and it's been operating that way since its inception, all the way back to, you could argue, like the first Capcom Cup was maybe 2013. So this has been a 12, 13 year long event. We're now at Capcom Cup 12, which has always been free, and Capcom has decided it's the time now to clamp down, monetize on the existing audience, and try to extract a profit out of this. Of course, this was not received particularly well by a large number of the core audience and community. For example, going pay-per-view means you can't really do restreams. This is an example of the rules regarding watch parties that Capcom had implemented for Street Fighter League Japan. You can watch Street Fighter League Japan on your own stream, but the only thing you could actually show is this section of the screen here, the timer. This red, everything else on the screen must be excluded from your layout, but you could stream yourself your own stream while the event was live, showing the timer so that viewers could open up the primary stream and sync up the primary stream with their favorite streamer commentating on the other monitor. Therefore, Capcom doesn't lose any viewership on the primary source. This is their way of trying to crack down on losing control of the IP and losing potential viewership on the main stream, which is apparently pretty normal to Japanese audiences, but batshit insane to most people in the West and just a general streaming culture, because for the most part, especially in the gaming sphere, a lot of the way viewership is distributed is through restreaming with popular influencers. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best outcome, but that is kind of the status quo currently. And generally, major events, especially in the esports realm, operate by gathering viewership data for all the restreamers as well, and they make their profit by selling sponsorships and ad placement in the main broadcast, which still get the eyeballs viewed even through the restreamers' streams. But Capcom is taking a different approach. This is their solution for pay-per-view Capcom Cup. Another reason why a lot of people were very annoyed with this initial pay-per-view announcement is because just the format of Capcom Cup itself, it's the culmination of a year-long tour of the global player base competing, playing with each other, and competing to find the best players from around the planet, which means actually a lot of these players don't even come from Capcom run tournaments. Most of the qualifiers, 28 out of the 48 players, come from World Warrior events. The World Warrior Tournament Series are region-locked tournaments that are leveraging existing tournament organizers and communities to run these events within the local regions around the globe. This ensures that they get qualifiers from players from all over the planet. But it's also like Capcom leveraging the work and labor of existing communities outside of what they're running. Capcom is not running these events directly. There's like a structure and rules that they have to abide by. Capcom provides some assets to assist with that, but this is not Capcom running it themselves. You're having a bunch of local TOs run these events, which will then qualify players from all over the world and send these players over to Japan to compete. And I'm talking about regions like Brazil, Chile, from all over the planet. And they go to Capcom Cup. And once again, the pay-per-view, in case you weren't clear about the price here, they're originally charging for the Capcom Cup finals, the final day, you could watch the group stages ahead of time, was 4,000 yen for Capcom Cup 12. And then the next day would have been Street Fighter League World Championships, but for the bundle, 6,000 yen, aka 40 USD. You had to cough up 40 USD if you wanted to see the finals of Capcom Cup, which in the context of the global economy was essentially pricing out people. Even if you are a diehard fan in certain regions around the world, you probably could not afford to watch Capcom Cup in many situations. You could have been part of the TOs that qualified these players and put in the work, and then basically Capcom says, hey, we might need your rent for the month for you to watch your player actually compete in the finals, even though you did the work to help support them and get them to this global stage. So it felt very antithetical to the whole global celebration of Street Fighter, And aside from just the actual cost to the viewer, all those reasons rubbed a lot of people in the community the wrong way. I mean, imagine being from Chile when Blas made it to grand finals on a historic run, 16-year-old prodigy here, which, unless you're from Chile, you were not expecting him to get to grand finals. You did not have the foresight to predict that Blas would be the rising star of this year. Imagine if you could not even watch this happen because it was pay-per-view. Literally, people from South America could have been priced out from seeing this historic event, which was a major, major event, not just for South America, Chile, but for the global community of Street Fighter to see this occur. On top of that, you actually can't produce content or anything. You can't have restreams, and also you can't produce any derivative content reporting on the results for pay-per-view for 2 weeks after the broadcast concludes. Capcom Cup next day. What's the big story? What's the highlights? What's the hype about? What were the major storylines? Who did what? Turns out you can't know anything about it unless people talk about it. I can just use my words to describe it to you, but you can't use any footage or any derivative content from the actual broadcast, even if it's transformative and more like a news reporting like you would have for the Super Bowl or whatever piece of content around a competitive event. Essentially killing the buzz around the event entirely and just trying to latch down and monetize a subset of the existing audience and sacrificing the growth of the greater broadcast. This led to a lot of complaining in the community at that time. From this article, they were referencing some comments where people called the pay-per-view model archaic, pointing out that even longtime pay-per-view utilizer UFC has recently switched away in favor of a monthly subscription following a deal with Paramount. Comments are put, I thought Capcom organized the circuit as a marketing tool for the game. Makes no sense to charge viewers to watch it. And esports is, unfortunately, still way too niche for that to be profitable. Traditionally, esports was a mechanism to get eyes on the game, not a product that was sold independently and meant to make a profit independently. So this whole move seemed extremely bizarre to the greater Street Fighter community. And it turns out this was actually bizarre to the head producers of Street Fighter itself. Matsumoto and Nakayama-san were apparently blindsided, the producers of Street Fighter 6, by this decision. This article here had a pretty interesting snippet here. Development team shocked by the decision for Capcom Cup to go pay-per-view. Responding to a fan's question on X about the disconnect between the esports division and the development team, Street Fighter 6 director Nakayama had a public comment. Yeah, who is that fan? One just lowly fan here happened to ask a comment here. But basically, Nakayama was vague tweeting about the situation. He said, I'm really torn over this rejected concept number 5, the whole everyone assembled vibe, referring to the artwork in the tweet. He thinks that the artwork is great and says, the dev team is completely a separate unit from the esports division. So we're only handling the main art and merch illustrations. I want this one turned into merch too. Please, Ikaps-san. Brilliant play from Nakayama-san. He used this whole controversy where the entire internet, especially on the western side of the community, is shitting on Capcom and the decision to go pay-per-view, and then said, oh man, yeah, by the way, the esports division and the dev division are completely separate. They control the artwork for this side of the esports. Please print that for me. I love the artwork merch. By the way, we're not associated with the esports division at all. I saw the bait. I took it. I tweeted at Nakayama and I said, doesn't it seem strange that the esports division and dev team seem entirely disconnected? Perhaps different monetization strategies could have resulted with collaboration rather than just charging such a high price for streaming Capcom Cup. And Nakayama surprisingly replied here. He said, it might sound strange, but it's true. Revenue targets and assigned tasks differ fundamentally by department. Even the development team was surprised by this announcement. At least Matsumoto and I were shocked at the venue. That said, since this matter occurred within the same company, we are currently discussing it. We apologize for any concern this may have caused, confirming that the esports division and the dev team are operating in complete silos from each other, and therefore the decisions that the esports division is making about Capcom Cup pay-per-view might not be for the best for the actual development team itself and might have a disconnect from the greater Street Fighter community. And in fact, it does show a big disconnect because there's been other initiatives in the past, aside from trying to do pay-per-view for the stream itself, for the Capcom Pro Tour. We used to have in Street Fighter V, when Nakayama and Matsumoto were running the show for late game Street Fighter V, they did a lot of CPT DLC packs. I mean, they did this throughout the history of Street Fighter V. They used to do things like selling the DLC packs with stages, custom costumes and colors. They also used to even like create costumes that the champion of Capcom Cup designed and sell that as DLC as well. And they would take portions of that revenue to fund the prize pools for the CPT and basically just put out a lot of content within the game itself, a lot of DLC to have recurring revenue where the Capcom Pro Tour would then advertise the game and keep players engaged throughout the year and throughout the season. This seemed like a big departure from that previous strategy that was employed. Capcom responded. They said they heard the feedback. They said, look, we heard you complaining. Give us some time. We'll cook up a response and give you more details coming up soon. Don't you worry. Just give us a little bit more time. Well, a little bit of time passed, and essentially what they said is, we don't give a shit. We're doing pay-per-view. They essentially doubled down on the pay-per-view decision. They said that the pay-per-view decision stems from our commitment to promoting our esports business in a sustainable manner over the medium to long term, and that they want to grow the scene and grow the esports division, and they want to clear up communication. So basically they apologize for the communication of this announcement, but don't acknowledge that there's a fundamental issue with what they're doing, but they are committing to esports. So there's a bit of a positive message there from my perspective, because I do value the Capcom Pro Tour and I do want it to exist. Personally, as you might have been able to decipher from this presentation so far, I think the pay-per-view decision is not necessarily the best one for the consumer or Capcom themselves, but they're committed and they're doing pay-per-view, is what they said. This is where a bunch of context is pretty important to have. Japan is the epicenter of Street Fighter. The rest of the world is almost a rounding error in terms of the engagement and player count and active participation in Street Fighter 6. Street Fighter 6 is taking off like crazy. It was doing that, in part due to being a really great game and a great complete gaming package on release with a lot of content for people to delve into, really high quality. But a big part of that is it went viral amongst Japanese social media influencers and the engagement with the pro scene and a lot of community-driven events and the VTubers, and it basically became years into its release, like more than a year plus into its release, became like a viral sensation. It's the thing to do. It's cool to follow Street Fighter, to play and participate. And this tweet here actually recently came out that said, Capcom's fiscal year 2026 Q3 earnings announcement. Street Fighter 6 sales reached 6.36 million units by the end of December, with 601,000 units sold in the last 3 months, now outselling the latest Monster Hunter title to claim the top-selling game throne. And this is 3 years, nearly 3 years after the game has released. It's outselling their latest Monster Hunter title. So this is now the king of Capcom. To even further illustrate that with the Steam chart numbers, generally the peak of the player count daily for Street Fighter 6 is currently around 30 to 40,000. That time is at 10 p.m. Time in Tokyo, which is around 9 a.m. Eastern Time. It absolutely peaks for peak gaming hours in Tokyo. Then for peak gaming hours in the US when Japan is sleeping, it falls all the way down from 30 to 40,000 to around 6,000 players. So you can see that if you got rid of the rest of the world combined for the most part, you would probably have still 30,000 active players, which is the range. You can cut off the rounding error, the range of measurement error between the peak hours in Japan, and it almost wouldn't make a difference. So you have to understand, Japan, smaller country in the global sense, but it's making up the vast majority of the people participating and actively playing the game daily. So they're a very important audience for this Japanese developer to cater to their domestic demographic. In fact, their esports initiatives with Street Fighter League, which is the more premier esports product that Capcom controls from the ground up. It doesn't leverage these local tournament organizers and these local events. It's a Capcom product through and through, which has professional players who are paid to participate in a season, sort of like an actual, sports league. They have been doing pay-per-view for Street Fighter League Japan for a number of years now. And in fact, it's been paying off, baby. The latest pay-per-view for Street Fighter League Japan Finals, which is when they do it, they tend to do the regular season free, then the finals are pay-per-view. They said that Street Fighter League Pro JP 2025, operated by Capcom as Japan's premier esports team league, achieved record-breaking results at its grand final event held on Saturday, January 31st, 2026, where both paid live stream viewership and on-site admission ticket sales reached all-time highs. So, meanwhile, while the West is complaining about the fundamental principle and issues with pay-per-view, for their biggest customer, their biggest audience, and, their domestic audience, Japan is eating this up. They love Street Fighter 6. They love the esports side of it. They're making big sales, and this is fueling the separate esports division for Capcom. Because remember, they have separated these divisions underneath the parent company, and they have separate revenue goals and targets. At a structural level, the esports team is trying to make money for themselves to justify their paycheck, completely independent of the sales of the product for Street Fighter 6. Typically, it's all under one integrated umbrella, where the esports division is a leg of the marketing division to try to drive sales of the core product and for DLC over time, and to build cultural awareness and engagement with the product. These are now completely separate things with separate goals because of the way Capcom has structured their company. And Japan absolutely is eating it up. The esports division is doing great out there. And the rest of the world can't really say the same. But now we actually finally have an update that they've been kicking the can down the road about from Capcom Fighters. And you might be wondering, like, oh, what are the suits going to say now, right? You know, the out of touch esports division, what are they going to let us know right now? These faceless suits who are making the decisions and cutting off access to the rest of the world. Well, I was kind of surprised to see that we actually got the suit. The faceless suits who have been pulling the strings, they put a face to it. My guy, Tetsuya Tabuchi, I apologize sincerely if I'm mispronouncing the name. I try to figure out a pronunciation. I couldn't figure it out. I don't know if it's Tabuchi or Tabuki. Please forgive me. But Tetsuya, he showed up, man. He came out here as the first person to show up in this announcement, and his title, this is crazy to read, E-Character, Licensed Business Division, Global Esports, Business Department, Deputy Head, and General Manager. I don't know which title is the formal title or what, but he has, it just keeps going and going. And it just feels like, instantly, I don't mean to judge a book by its cover, but we're literally getting the suits. The business decisions behind what's going on and the esports department is, you know, not someone who at first glance feels like they would be in touch with the greater competitive gaming sphere. It's just an impression I'm getting. Okay, I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but he's got a suit on. He's looking well groomed. He's looking a little seasoned, and his title is, it wraps around his name. It just keeps going and going. But we have an announcement. He says, "Hello everyone, my name is Tabuchi, and I'm in charge of the Capcom Esports Business Division." In the announcement, it goes on to say, "Following the announcement that live viewing for this event would be ticketed, we carefully reviewed the many opinions and feedback we received from the community. After thorough discussions across various departments within Capcom, we've decided on the following to revise the pricing of live viewing tickets." They said, "However, after reviewing pricing structure and cost of living standards across a wide range of global content, we have re-evaluated the pricing to ensure that fans around the world can more easily enjoy the event," stating that originally they priced this the same thing that they do for Street Fighter League Japan and pricing it for a Japanese market. So what do they actually do? The price for pay-per-view for the final days, you know, the group stages remain free. The very final days have dropped significantly. Originally $40 for the bundle. It's now $10 USD to watch the final 2 days. So that is a huge percent drop in the price, which is a lot more affordable for more people around the world to justify spending any money on watching people play video games. They also changed the streaming platform. Apparently this Spawn platform is a lot less popular in Japan compared to the larger streaming platform that was used before. So maybe they were able to negotiate a way out of this streaming contract, pay-per-view contract with the other streaming service and find a better deal. They also announced that, hey, co-streaming is allowed, no application needed. Listen, you remember that little timer in the middle of the screen? Don't worry about that. You can have your watch party for free, no big deal. Just like every other esports event on the planet for the non-pay-per-view stages, Wednesday to Friday, not for the finals on Saturday and Sunday. And they also point out here that for the official streams, they're going to have English, Japanese, Spanish, and Portuguese, which does cover a lot of languages, which is a great option to have. They also mentioned that they're going to have a Chinese stream as well on Kuaishou, so they're covering the Chinese audience. So that's a pretty great addition, right? Making sure that they have a lot of languages to support their global international audience. I think that's a plus here. But they also announced that they're going to be doing live streaming in the Battlehub. So they were actually teasing this feature originally about a week or so ago, where they did a test broadcast of Street Fighter League Japan inside the Battlehub, and they're going to go for it for Capcom Cup, which I think is actually really cool. And the Battlehub itself, which is like the social hub lobby that you can join with your digital avatar and walk around and interact with people with their discussing amalgamations that they've created in the character creation mode and sit down to battle people like cabs. It's like a social feature that a lot of people actually use. They had a big screen there in the middle of the whole Battle Hub, which was obviously set up to stream competitive matches and stream, things that events that people would want to watch. They're actually going to go for it after this test, which is pretty cool. However, this stream, they're saying that this is going to be a trial stream. There might be disruptions. It might not work. And this is going to be for the finals. It's going to be free in-game. So if you have access to the game, you can boot up, not pay the ticket, and watch on Saturday and Sunday in your Battle Hub. It might not work, though. It has no commentary, and it's first come, first serve because the Battle Hub has limited capacity. Literally, if you go up to the Battle Hub right now, you have to join the server that you want to join. Some people are doing the math. It's for sure less than 10,000 total people this can support. I would argue probably less, but it's only in, the 5 to low 6 figures range of total number of people that this could support at max capacity, and that's really giving it a lot of leeway to assume that's going to work properly. And if you look back at the historic viewership for Capcom Cup has been going up and up. Capcom Cup 11 last year peaked at 354,000 viewers for the free finals, and Battle Hub is not going to be able to sustain that whatsoever. But overall, I find this to be kind of cool and something that is great to create a natural integration of esports into the product itself. And there could be people in the Battle Hub who don't know about Capcom Cup, who just play the game casually and would actually be able to learn about the esports scene. And I think that's a great feature to have. It's not a great feature to me to be pitched as the alternative to buying a ticket, but I think it's a great thing to have just for integration, for awareness with the product. But also, even though it's going to be streaming there with no commentary, no audio, which is going to lead you to being maybe confused about who's playing, context for the matches. They even say here, as a result, some tournament details of a match are going to be difficult to follow. You also cannot co-stream the Battle Hub. They say co-streaming a Battle Hub live streams is not possible. I don't know if that's a challenge or a translation issue, because I'm pretty sure it's possible. I'm pretty sure I can open Battle Hub and stream Battle Hub during Capcom Cup. So really what they mean to say is we will probably try to enforce some DMCA claims or whatever legal action they can to make sure that you're not basically pirating the game. Because I can for sure boot up Battle Hub and try to stream that if I manage to get in. So kind of a weird, threatening note there. Imagine you're a casual Battle Hub fan and you play with the Avatar Battle mode in Battle Hub. You boot up on Saturday and Sunday and you're streaming. Oh, I can't wait to play my Avatar battles because I have no idea about the greater competitive community. And then you accidentally start streaming Capcom Cup and the Cap Cops knock down your door and DMCA strike your stream. I don't know. It's a little weird to me. That's very strange. And it just goes to show, once again, that the pay-per-view concept as a whole is just weird. It's just a weird thing. Overall, you know what? It was pretty interesting to see this announcement. I mean, look at the difference between the business suits and Matsumoto here with the actual developers for Street Fighter 6. It's just a world of difference. I'm sorry, a picture says 1,000 words. You can just see a world of difference between these two different divisions in Capcom at one glance. But they're going to close out the announcement by saying, going forward, Capcom Esports will continue to work as one company to support the growth and expansion of the competitive and tournament scene for Street Fighter. We will also strongly promote initiatives that contribute to the development of the esports ecosystem as a whole. So they go on to make a promise to continue to support esports in the world of Street Fighter. And they're really trying to emphasize this idea of Capcom working as one company. Clearly a very polite way to acknowledge, hey, we fucked up and didn't talk to each other. And that led to a lot of bad PR. And they're trying to do this announcement literally as a way to bridge the gap between the two teams and try to communicate that to the greater community. I gotta be honest, a well-crafted PR move overall. I see the strings that they're pulling here and the way they're organizing this, and their PR strategy here, not bad. But the response from the West, still overall, they're missing the core component. It's still pay-per-view. So a lot of people are still pissed. Brutus here says, only top 8 is without a paywall now, guys. Oh, and the free viewing option has limited slots. Fuck you if you're not home to watch. Don't be satisfied with a company that, a compromise that only exists because they tried to fuck you even harder. The pay-per-view model should still not exist. Gatti here says, the base product is the game. Anything media related to it simply can be an advertisement for the product. Why is this lovely man in a suit charging me to watch their marketing strategy? Some other people were saying things along the lines of this one commenter, still enjoy watching Street Fighter 6, but hard to give a fuck about CPT now. And this is the general sentiment you're seeing. Most people, as soon as the very first pay-per-view announcement was given out in late September, immediately checked out from the Capcom Pro Tour. Why would I watch the next few remaining qualifying events and be engaged with the tournaments and feel hyped if I know at the end of it they're going to try to charge me $40 to watch the finals and I'm going to be disconnected from the finals? It puts an entire damper on the year-long process leading up to this. I was so deeply disappointed as someone who produces a lot of content around the Capcom Pro Tour and makes a huge effort to try to do the marketing for Capcom, because they do a terrible job of promoting the World Warrior qualifying events and covering their own tournaments. I feel like I've worked my ass off to try to cover these events and promote the esports scene here in the West. And then to just go ahead and say, hey, by the way, we're putting pay-per-view on this and not offer any kind of increased value to the product or increased accessibility to partaking in the esports scene, I just felt like it was a slap in the face, man. It was so disappointing to me. So disappointing to me. You can monetize in so many ways. You can offer a premium pay-per-view stream that has reduced ads and maybe extra content. You can create DLC. You can even just put out a damn GoFundMe. There's people who would be willing to put their money to support this initiative, but just don't limit the amount of access to people around the world. It doesn't make sense. You're purposely trying to cut off circulation and buzz and promotion around your esports scene, which will lead to it to dry out and be less relevant to the rest of the world. It doesn't make sense. It's supposed to be a global celebration of Street Fighter, the culmination of a year of players from around the world, and you're still pricing people out and still limiting access to what the whole event is all about. It's antithetical to the whole premise of the Capcom Pro Tour to begin with. That said, a lot of people from the Western audience are disappointed. That's the general sentiment is negative. A few people do acknowledge that the price has improved. Like in general, there's a lot of good things here objectively. The Battlehub viewing experience is better. The price is greatly reduced. I think I would pay $10 individually to watch this. Yes, but it's not the point overall. So some people had some mixed reactions, but the main thing is, how does the core audience receive this? How does Japan receive this news? Well, unlike the West, Japan they're glazing it, man. They love it. They're giving a standing ovation right now. Round of applause all around. Even people who from the Japanese community who've been a little bit more critical of Capcom in recent times, like Shuto, they say here that the announcement about the Capcom Cup live viewing tickets has arrived. They made it so much more enjoyable and attractive to watch events ever than before, with all sorts of improvements. Especially being able to watch the finals in the Battlehub is just godly. I sincerely express my heartfelt gratitude to Capcom Esports for this kind of consideration. John Takeuchi says, it's changed so much. The feeling that they really want everyone to enjoy the tournament comes through super strongly. I'm way too excited for the Battlehub live viewing. So a lot of people are just like, Capcom, you did it again. This is the best news of all time. And one commenter here had a little bit more of a critical take here. Gonna buy the pay ticket. There are some idiots trying to make it free, but they already said they're going to stream it for free on Battlehub. Asking to show it for free when you don't even own the game is a bit too thick-skinned, don't you think? So the attitudes from a lot of the reactions in Japan are completely different, and this is the greatest fucking announcement of all time. Even though fundamentally, at its core, it doesn't change the entire principle of the matter that Capcom is purposely limiting the reach of their esports initiative and also trying to profit off the backs of community-driven labor and tournament organization, and still potentially pricing out people from underprivileged economic regions who might not be able to spare that money to watch their representative from their home local region who was good enough to grind it out and win the World Warrior qualifier and had this opportunity to get to Japan. And there might be another Blaz run or another player like Blaz coming up from an underrepresented community who makes a historic run. And those people won't be able to enjoy that live or be able to see the replay for 2 weeks later because it's going to be paywalled until all the buzz and excitement is done, and also limit the potential for virality and sharing the moment on social media and growing the awareness of Street Fighter esports to the global audience who might not be aware of this whole ecosystem and that Street Fighter esports even exists. So what's left for Capcom Cup? I'm not sure. I am still so conflicted about this whole thing. Like I said before, I just think it's antithetical to the purpose of the tour. I'm not against monetization. I'm not against making money at all. I want this to be sustainable as well. I think charging for Street Fighter leagues, your domestic premium esports product, I think that's totally fine. I don't really care about that. I wouldn't even mind doing pay-per-view for specific show matches. If Daigo and Mena RD ever finally throw down, if they do pay-per-view, like, I'd be disappointed and annoyed, and also, like, not feel good for people who can't afford it, but I'd understand it a lot more than the Capcom Pro Tour. I think fundamentally the Capcom Pro Tour is the one that needs to remain free. I'm not against pay-per-view entirely as a concept. I'm not against making money. It just, you're making money at the expense of the long-term growth and success of the esports division, the product, and the community culture, essentially. You're monetizing the community culture and you're inhibiting its growth. And I just think that's fundamentally not the way to go about it. People want to spend money. I mean, obviously, this is an example of Dota 2 and the International Battle Pass, where they've already raised $18 million by selling DLC. Now, to be fair, the Street Fighter 6 player count here in green is literally just a blip compared to the nearly million concurrent players that Dota 2 gets daily. So obviously chop off, like, 3 zeros off this figure. But it's not impossible to charge other ways, to raise money other ways. I just feel like this is a short-term and short-sighted initiative, and I'm still very disappointed about this whole development. And I think a lot of viewers are going to still be checked out of Capcom Cup and basically just make it not relevant. It's no longer going to occupy space in their mind, and I find that extremely disappointing as someone who has loved Street Fighter esports, loved Capcom Cup, put a ton of effort to go to tournaments, compete myself, promote it, do content, research it, try to expose it to a larger audience, and make it hype and something that people can follow the storylines and make it tangible and something that people can really follow at home. I just think, what's the point? What's the point? What's the point in me covering all these stories that Capcom refuses to cover if at the end of it, people aren't going to be able to see the finals? Like, I just feel very, very disconnected as well as a hardcore fan of Capcom Cup. But that said, it is only $10. I can see a lot of people just buying it. I can see this potentially being a financial success in the short term for Capcom. And this might be the play for the future. So I'm not sure where it goes from here. I hope they correct the ship before it begins to result in less awareness in the greater community. But at the same time, it's working really well in Japan. I understand it from a short-term business perspective entirely, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure where this goes from here. Overall, I'm hoping for the best for esports. I'm hoping that we can actually enjoy Capcom Cup, and I just wish this went away so it would be easier to tune in and share the moment with all the community. That's all I got. Let me know what you think in the comments. Catch you in the next one. Peace.